Hello, welcome to part 3 of episode 1 from the series about Camille Flammarion. So I'll call Charles to join us in the studio. Hello, Charles, welcome.
Hello, Munir. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for having me. Very happy to be here again with you to share all this biographical information about Camille Flammarion, who will be homenageated this whole year.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Charles. To think that we initially had the idea of, presenting his biography in 1 hour, one meeting, and then this is the third one to talk about his rich biography. So it's a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to have you all here watching with us and sharing all these that Charles is bringing to us. It's really valuable. I mentioned so many times. This book, his autobiography by Camille Flammarion, is only available in French, as far as we know, and it is wonderful to have Charles presenting it to us, in English, so that we can get to know Camille Flammarion better. We want to thank, Peace, who is organizing these events, and also the Irish Spiritist Association, the British Union of Spiritist Society, and Kardec Radio for helping us, supporting us in this enterprise. So, Charles, the studio is all yours. So, again, for another wonderful time with all that you have prepared for us today. So it's all yours.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Munir. Okay, so the two first lives, we have seen the beginning of his biography, starting from his birth in 1842. And we showed how he came to Paris, how the events in his life made him enter in this career as an astronomer. We saw also how he met Allan Kardec, the Spirit's book, by chance, somewhere in the library in Paris, and meeting Allan Kardec in the Spiritist Study Society of Paris, where he was acting as a medium, and also in another society led by Mrs. Huet. Where he also acted as a medium, and also taking notes of the other communication received and publishing them in some books, as we have seen. Okay, so we reached 1869 when Kardec died, and he was invited to make a speech on his grave, and he accepted. So let's, if you can share the slide, Munir. Yes. So we reached 1869. This speech he did on Kardec's funeral. We stopped more or less in the middle, so I will go very quickly over the slide we have seen already. First, he remembered a similar exercise he made at the funeral of Mr. Didier, who was a publisher, saying that it was even more difficult to make this speech for Kardec, and really homenageating very strongly the service that the author of the Spirit's book has rendered to philosophy. He also acknowledged the fact that Kardec initiated a methodical examination of this phenomenon, making kind of scientific observations in order to try to understand better, to conceptualize better the spiritual world and the spiritist phenomenon. He also, as you can see, was really unanimously honoring his works and his memory. He had a deep, profound respect for Allan Kardec. We will see it a little bit more later. Kardec faced some rivalries, Flammarion as well. All these people bringing some new ideas always face this, and he was, as you can see, calling the Spiritist movement as a brotherly, to be united as brotherly solidarity. It was a nice from his part. He also made this remark, a lot of objections that have been made to Kardec, because he saw the phenomenon, he convinced himself, and then he pushed through all the consequences out of the phenomenon. And this has been criticized by some, saying, before going so far, you should first have demonstrated more strongly the reality of the phenomenon itself. Nevertheless, Camille Flammarion recognized that it was better like this, seeing the consoling aspect of the Spiritist body of knowledge, as we have seen, and to bring to spiritualism so many people who were floating in materialism, or even almost committing suicide and things like that, who have been saved thanks to this wonderful teachings that and all these answers and this understanding which is brought by the Spiritist body of knowledge. And Camille Flammarion recognized that it was better like this, because, as I commented also, if Kardec would have waited scientific proof and unanimously accepted by the scientific community on the Spiritist phenomenon, he would still today be waiting. So it was good he did not wait and went really up to the end, to all the philosophical and moral, ethical consequences out of the phenomenon. Otherwise, his mission would have been much more reduced. And Camille Flammarion said, he called him the incarnated common sense. And this is a sentence which is very famous from this speech, because Kardec really analyzed everything in a really rational, with common sense way. He never got satellised, as I said, means too enthusiastic on something. No, he always stayed very the feet on the earth, calm, quiet, and going really stepwise. Albeit he went far, he went only with a lot of caution, and this was also recognized by Flammarion. And the Flammarion also was saying, this was a message, that's the last slide we have seen last week. This complex study must now enter its scientific period. This was a message he sent to the Spiritists at that time, because a lot of them went already, as I just commented, too enthusiastically, and that was not really the way of Camille Flammarion doing the things. So he encouraged the scientific period, which indeed happened, not only in France but also in UK, with William Crookes, and later the Society for Psychical Research, and all these psychic investigation institutions wherever in the world. Really, that's the moment that the Spiritist phenomenon, in particular ectoplasmy, entered into this scientific period. Nevertheless, I think Flammarion was a little bit too optimistic. He, I think, underestimated somehow the resistance of the scientists to admit, even with the best evidences, the reality of this phenomenon. This is still today the situation, because the science mainstream is still following a materialistic paradigm. Nevertheless, I think he was right. He had the expectation it would come quicker. It took a little bit, it took a little bit more time, will take still more time, but for sure, one day we will get there. And then Flammarion sent another message to the Spiritist community at that time. Spiritist is not a religion, but it is a science. Today, I would even go a little bit further. Spiritism is, of course, not a religion, as Kardec wrote it very clearly. I think I explained this already several times in past lives. Because Spiritism has not the characteristic as what is commonly understood as being a religion, means dogmatical approach, rituals, sacerdotal hierarchy, and exclusivism, and all these problems that are in the traditional religious movement. Spiritism has nothing of that. Spiritism is only following a morality which can be categorized as universal moral laws, which are simply based on the laws of nature. So they are universal, and by looking more carefully, these moral laws are the common point between almost all the religions movement around the world, whether it's Christian or whether it is Oriental, like Buddhist or Hinduist, or even from Quran, Islam. All these moral principles are the same and common, and that is really the ground where everyone can find a point in common. And this is exactly what Kardec was promoting in the Spiritist body of knowledge. And this is what Camille Flammarion is explaining here. He's saying also it's a science. Yes, I must admit it can be considered as a science, but not as per the current paradigm. I mean, with a lot of atheists and a lot of materialists in the science, Spiritist is following a spiritualist paradigm. So it's not an academic science as of today, studying only matter, putting some blinds, and ignoring all what is not matter, means all what is from the spiritual world. The time of dogmas is over. Yes, for sure. The people are getting more with education, more and more evolved, more and more intelligent. They don't accept things to be said anymore. They prefer to have the things, they require the things to be explained. And this is exactly why this period of dogmas is over. Now, before believing something, a lot of people, more and more people want to understand first. Nature embraces the universe. God himself, who has one made man in the image, who was once made in the image of man, the anthropomorphic God, can only be considered by modern metaphysics as a spirit in nature. And this is remembering he had already published his book, God in Nature, that will be commented in one of the next speeches. The supernatural does not exist, of course. The supernatural, what is considered supernatural, will be considered natural tomorrow once we understand the laws. Manifestations obtained through mediums, such as those of magnetism and somnambulism, are of the natural order and must be strictly subjected to the control of experience. So undergo the scientific methodology. There are no more miracles. Another strong statement from Camille Flammarion that is common with the statements of Kardec. We are witnessing the dawn of an unknown science. Who could predict what consequences the positive study of this new psychology will lead to in the world of thought? And it's really a revolution. It was a disruption, a disruptive concept that is still not perceived as such nowadays. And this revolution in the world of thought still has to come. It is coming slowly but surely. Now, I think I commented already, we talk about spiritual intelligence, or SQ, spiritual quotient. And it is something where we are really slowly but surely coming to this revolution in the world of thought as well. And Flammarion adds, faced with such truths, which are still only partially revealed, How absurd and worthless does a priori negation seem? I didn't see it, so I don't believe in it. Or I don't believe in it, so it does not exist. This type of reasoning that we still hear too much, even by scientists, is really absurd, as Camille Flammarion is saying here. And as I commented already last time, Camille was absolutely like that, not like that. He did never negated something a priori. He always said, this looks strange, so let's give a look at it and verify what it is about. When we compare the little we know and the smallness of our sphere of perception to the quantity of what exists, we cannot avoid to conclude that we know nothing and that everything remains to be known. What right do we therefore have to pronounce the world impossible in the face of facts that we observe without being able to discover their unique cause? At that time, it was the beginning of spectral analysis, infrared, ultraviolet. The scientists were discovering a lot of things that are totally escaping from our senses, like the sight or the auditions, different frequencies, and so on. Discovering that what we perceive from nature is far from all what exists in nature. Our senses are limited. Science opens us to views as authoritative as the previous ones on the phenomenon of life and death and on the force that animates us. What is life? It's not fully answered by science yet. We just need to observe the circulation of existence. And then he also develops, I did not put the speech entirely, showing how these cycles in nature, with an clear allusion to the reincarnation, the seasons, the physical body when we die is then recycled by nature and making some used for the organic matter for other plants or even other human beings, and so on and so on, showing this circulation of the existences and of the matter around the phenomenon of life. Everything is just a metamorphosis, carried away in their eternal course. The atoms constituting matter constantly pass from one body to another, from the animal to plant, from the plant to the atmosphere, from the atmosphere to man, and our own body throughout our entire life continually changes its constituent substance, just as the flame only shines through constantly renewed elements. And when the soul has flown away, this same body, already transformed so many times during life, definitively returns all the molecules to nature, never to take them back again. The inadmissible dogma of the resurrection of the flesh has been replaced by the high doctrine of the transmigration of souls. So another very strong statement of Camille Flammarion at that opportunity. Supreme law of nature, the body is only a transitory assembly of particles which do not belong to it and which the soul has grouped according to its own type to create organs, putting it in relation with our physical world. So it's describing here exactly what happens when we incarnate. It's our soul, our physical or spiritual body, which is organizing our physical body and explaining embryogenesis and explaining also how we stay ourselves in spite of the fact most of the atoms constituting our physical body are changing very quickly. And while our body is thus renewed piece by piece through the perpetual exchange of materials, while one day it falls an inert mass never to rise again, our spirit, a personal being, has constantly kept its indestructible identity, has reigned as sovereign over the matter with which he was clothed, thus establishing by this constant and universal fact his independent personality, his spiritual essence, not subject to the empire of space and time, his individual greatness, his immortality. So see how strong is this statement about the spirituality, the spiritualist paradigm. How strong Camille Flammarion was convinced about this, about the existence and the immortality of the soul. And look, what is interesting, he say, our spiritual essence is not in the empire of the space and time. Our quadridimensional space-time, which has been so developed in other a little bit later by Albert Einstein in this theory of relativity. So the spirit is and our spiritual body are out of this quadridimensional space where our physical body is. What is the mystery of life? By what links is the soul attached to the organism? By what outcome does it escape? In what form and under what condition does it exist after death? What memories, what affections does it keep? These are, gentlemen, so many problems which are far from being resolved and which together will constitute the psychological science of the future. You see here, he even gives a definition of what is the psychological science. You can see it's quite different from what is today called psychology. The science psychologique, psychological science, was embracing a much wider scope, including the answers to all these questions Camille Flammarion is raising here during his speech. Some men can deny the very existence of the soul as that of God, affirm that moral truth does not exist, that there are no intelligent laws in nature, and that we spiritualists are the duped by an immense illusion. Others may, on the contrary, declare that they know by a special privilege the essence of the human soul, the form of the supreme being, the states of the future life. Both call us atheists, and call us atheists because our reason refuses their faith. Both of them, gentlemen, will not prevent us from being here, faced with the greatest problems, from being interested in these things, which are far from being foreign to us, and from having the right to apply the experimental methods of contemporary science to the search of truth. And this is also a statement very strong. What did Kardec initiate? What did he reivindicate as a right? To study this phenomenon according to contemporary science methods, to think, to reflect scientifically based on the hypothesis that the soul exists, based on the spiritualist paradigm, and not to the reduced materialist paradigm. The Spiritism is only asking to remove the blinds and to use this rational method for this subject, which were, as we have seen in the previous statements, either calling us as being crazy or, let's say, reserved matter for official religions. No, we should really apply our common sense, our intelligence to analyze the spiritual things as well. And this is basically the claim from the spiritists and from the spiritualists in general. It is through the positive study of the effects that we go back to the appreciation of the causes. In the orders of studies brought together under the generic name of Spiritism, the fact exists. Again, he was deeply convinced about the reality of the phenomenon for having witnessed them himself. But no one knows their mode of production. They exist just as well as electrical, luminous, caloric phenomenon. But gentlemen, we know neither biology nor physiology. What is the human body? What is the brain? What is the absolute action of the soul? We don't know it. Today, of course, 160 years later, we know a little bit more but still science is ignoring a lot of things about life, even today. We know the mechanism, but we do not know what is behind driving this mechanism. We also ignore the essence of the electricity. This, in the meantime, has been found. It's the electrons circulating in some conducting materials. The essence of light, this also has been found in the meantime. It was not known at that time, but now we know that it is photons or electromagnetic radiation, the light. But still, we don't know, for instance, universal attraction, what it is. This science is ignoring until today what it is. It is therefore wise to observe all these facts without bias and to try to determine their causes, which are perhaps of various kinds and more numerous than we have supposed until now. And that's, again, the statement, of Camille Flammarion. He said, okay, Kardec went there, he gave an explanation. This explanation is the best one today. But I think it will not be so simple. It may be a little bit more complicated, and yet there is still a lot of things to discover. And in this, he's probably completely right. Those whose vision is limited by pride or prejudice do not understand these anxious desires of our thoughts, eager to know. Let them cast sarcasm and anathema on this type of study. We raise our contemplations higher. You were the first, O master and friend, talking to the soul of Allan Kardec. You were the first who, from the beginning of my astronomical career, showed a keen sympathy for my deductions relating to the existence of celestial humanities, because taking in the hand the book of the plurality of inhabited worlds, you immediately placed it at the base of the doctrinal edifice that you dreamed of. Very often we talked together about this mysterious celestial life. You see, very often we talked about. So they had a lot of talks. There were a lot of talks between Flammarion and Kardec whilst Kardec was alive. Know, O soul, you know by direct vision what this spiritual life consists of, to which we all will return and which we forget during this existence. Very nice, isn't it? Now you have returned to this world from which we came, and you are reaping the fruit of your earthly studies. Your envelope sleeps at our feet. Your brain is extinguished. Your eyes are closed, to no longer open. Your words will no longer be heard. We know that we will all arrive at the same last sleep, at the same inertia, to the same dust. But it is not in this envelope that we put our glory and our hope. The body falls, the soul remains and returns to space. Wonderful, isn't it? We will find ourselves in a better world and in the immense sky where our most powerful faculties will be exercised. We will continue the studies which on earth had only a theater too narrow to contain them. We prefer to know these truths than to believe that you lie entirely in this corpse and that your soul has been destroyed by the cessation of the play of an organ. Immortality is the light of life, as this brilliant sun is the light of nature. Goodbye, my dear Allan Kardec. Goodbye. So this was the speech of Flammarion on funeral of Allan Kardec, and I think he really made an outstanding job here. The speech is really absolutely wonderful. He accepted to do it, and we are very lucky for having still today the memory of this speech and to be able to comment it as we are doing, as we did it last week and today. Let's go now back to his memoir. Camille Flammarion adds, the committee of the Spiritists offered me to succeed Allan Kardec as president of the Spiritist Society. I refused, knowing that 9/10 of his disciples would continue to see it for a long time to come as a religion rather as a science, and that the identity of the spirits is far from being proven. So you see, they asked him to succeed Kardec in the presidency of the Spiritist Society, but he refused. And of course, then they had to nominate another one. But Camille Flammarion refused, showing very clearly the motives and the motivations. Still, as we understood Camille Flammarion, are completely understandable. But okay, Kardec went, returned to the spiritual world. Camille Flammarion stayed here, but he continued his journey, as we will see from now on, with a lot of productions that was extremely precious also for spiritists. Okay. He wrote also in his memoir written in 1911, more than 40 years ago later, the disciples of Allan Kardec have barely modified their faith. Most still refuse scientific analysis, which alone, however, can instruct us accurately. And it is true, I think, even today, a lot of spiritists are still refusing scientific analysis. We must also say in favor of the spiritists that a lot of so-called scientific analysis was more something like fraud hunting and how to say, coming with an a priori disbelief and so on. There were not enough scientific scientists as Camille Flammarion himself willing to study the phenomenon openly, without a priori, and pushing all the consequences. Okay, so this situation is, I would say, still valid today, albeit the spiritists even today are, of course, encouraging all sincere and serious scientific research according to the scientific methods, according to the today's epistemology, means not rejecting anything a priori, not pushing our thoughts, but observing neutrally, with impartiality, the phenomenon of nature in order to come to the conclusions. And still, as long as scientists will remain with the blinds of materialism, the studies will, of course, not be good enough. But as soon as this paradigm will change, then I'm sure everyone will collaborate again in the benefit of the progress of science towards also the spiritual world. And now another statement from Camille Flammarion in his memoir regarding my speeches at the funeral of Allan Kardec and his publisher Didier. I must declare that, as in the other circumstances I have spoken about, I never received from them any communication from beyond the grave. And that was a kind of a frustration from Flammarion. He knew them. Why did Didier and Kardec not communicate themselves as spirits directly to him? That is a good question that Camille Flammarion was raising here. We still can raise this question. My opinion is his mission was different. The mission of Camille Flammarion was exactly not to go too quickly and to make his career as popularizing astronomy, as we will see in the continuation of this presentation of Camille Flammarion's biography. In his memoir, Camille Flammarion is also mentioning the authoritarian, proud, and selfish attitudes of many famous scientists. We talked already about Le Verrier, who fired him because he published the book Plurality of Inhabited Worlds, which was a scandal for Le Verrier, with a materialist blinds. Imagine that life could exist in some other planet. It was completely crazy for them. So they fired him. But Le Verrier and Victor Cousin, which were very known at that time, were as a character very terrible, awful. They were harming their collaborators and thus jeopardizing the development of science. Camille Flammarion stayed 4 years with Le Verrier. He was one who stayed almost the longest, because when he was there, more than 100 people were turning and turning and turning, because nobody could survive with this authoritarian, selfish, and proud attitude of Le Verrier himself. Okay, and unfortunately, it was like that with a lot of other scientists, and Camille Flammarion was completely conscient of this. And this is, as I said, certainly the reason why the scientific approach of psychic phenomena did not, I added here, yet bring the results expected by Camille Flammarion when he said that the spiritist must now enter in the scientific, must now become a science. It's 155 years ago, I remember, and still today the blinds did not fall. Many researchers, in fact, were more front-hunting exercises than true scientific researchers. True scientific researchers, there were some like Frederick Myers, like William Crookes, like Gustave Gelet, like some others, but a lot of others, even Charles Richet, they did not investigate as they should. Gabriel Delanne was another one, because of course he was a scientist and spiritist in the same time, that, as we have seen last year on these same channels. And this is why Kardec went to the conclusion without waiting this to happen. Otherwise, again, he would have died, have written maybe one book, but not the 5 as extended as the spiritist body of knowledge. And what is really remarkable is he went until to the end, pushing all the consequences, and up to date, nothing has been proven from being false. No single fundamental principle of the spiritist body of knowledge, as codified by Allan Kardec 150, 160 years ago, was proven to be false. So it's if we use the theory of Thomas Kuhn about the epistemology, or about what is science, really the spiritualist, the body of knowledge, is a paradigm which has a very big stability, because it's already 160 years without major anomalies, and no anomaly at all on the fundamental principles. So that was really the work of Allan Kardec, of course, assisted by the spirituality. Okay. Let's proceed. 1870, he published his 12th book, Contemplation Scientifique, Scientific Contemplations. This was a book who had a lot of reprints, as we will see later on. And it was a collection of articles published in the magazine and journals about the most curious new topics. It was a kind of chronique of what's new in science, and he decided to publish it in the book. And this, as you can see here, was the first series. It was 4th edition already in 1885, and the first one was 1870. There was a revised edition in 1 volume in 1909. Okay, 1870 was also the horrible war. The Prussian against the French. Camille was named captain and participated to the defense of Paris, where the Prussians were close to invade Paris. Many Parisians at that during that war died from shelling and starvation. And after you can see here the picture of Camille Flammarion with the 3 bars of a captain during this war. And he really helped a lot, making observation, with the instruments. They were observing the positions of the enemy, of the batteries, and so on. And orienting the defense in order to avoid Paris to be invaded, and with quite some success. And after the war, he lived Rue Cassini, which was very close to the observatory. And Leverrier, who fired Camille Flammarion in 1861, as we have seen, was himself fired the 5th of February, 1870, and replaced by Delaunay, because there were so many people unsatisfied with Leverrier, including Flammarion, writing notes and so on to the government, that at the end the government decided to remove Leverrier from his activity of directing the Observatory of Paris. In the Revue Spirit of 1870 and 1869, Camille Flammarion published some articles. You can see here, Eternal Life, what is the nature of the soul. So he continued, he refused to lead the group, but he was still writing and publishing some articles in the Spiritist magazine. But then from 1870 until 1880, it was more silent. He did not do a lot of publication. He was more focusing, as you can see here, on balloon travels, air travels. And that was his 13th book, which was written by him, but also by other authors. Everyone, each of them, commenting his travels in balloon. And this one part of the book was dedicated to the travels of Camille Flammarion. And there is a nice drawing of Camille Flammarion in this book, which is reproduced here in the center of the slide. Okay. And here you see this book is also full of other images. You can see the balloon, and we can recognize here Camille Flammarion, and here as well, showing how they went up, and some in this one they were flying. There were some butterflies around them, and most of the books of Camille Flammarion are very nicely illustrated, as you can see here, in black and white, but also in colors. And here you can see Camille Flammarion was studying also the atmosphere, and not only the astronomy. He was studying the shadow of the balloon in the clouds, including this, what is the name of this? This luminous circle, aureole in French, around the balloon, which was an effect that he went, why is this? And then he was analyzing and making a theory of the reason of this halo, which was visible around the nacelle of the balloon in its shadow in the clouds. Very interesting. And this, in the book, you can see also this map. And this map is showing the several travels he made. So you see a lot of travels to Fontainebleau, close to Paris, but also two longer travel. One, as we told already, up to Prussia. He landed in Solingen between Köln and Düsseldorf. And another one, he was going south and almost up to Angoulême. So you see, it was quite audacious at that time, because the balloons were a little bit unsafe. But of course, he knew what he was doing to have so long travels. Okay. 1872, I was talking about the atmosphere. He wrote a book about atmospheres. So he was studying not only astronomy, but also meteorology, and describing the great phenomenon of nature. So it's a book of 824 pages. I mean, the books of Flammarion are impressively thick. It gives quite some work to read them. Again, you can see in them some images, even some in color, which was quite seldom for that time. And look at here, books first, Our Planet and Its Vital Fluid. You see, interesting title, this force of life which is existing on our planet. 1872, another book he wrote, History of the Sky, you can see. all the historical conception, what is the sky, you know, first this dome which was existing above the earth, which was flat at the beginning, until the modern conceptions, and including also the maps of constellations seen from the North Hemisphere and also from the South Hemisphere. 1872, still, Life of Copernicus and History of the Discovery of the World System. As an astronomer, he made also a lot of historical studies from the beginning of astronomy. So this he published in 1872. 1873, another traveling balloon from Paris to Vaucouleurs. And Vaucouleurs is close to his birthplace. Vaucouleurs is where Jeanne d'Arc saw the local representative of the king, who convinced him to accompany her up to the king at the beginning of Joan of Arc mission, and also very close to where Léon Denis was born, in city of Fougue. You can see at every travel he was showing the itinerary on the map, but also showing this curve with the altitude of the balloon. And here, for instance, they went down a little bit because there was a strong wind. So for safety, they came down a little bit before going up again, and until going to the highest altitude, which was for this travel a little bit above 2,000 meters. 1874, he married with Sylvie Petiot, with whom he had relations already for several years. Here you have a picture of Sylvie Petiot when she was 25 years old. She was 4 years older than him. And for honeymoon, he took her in a balloon. Interesting, isn't it? And I mean, to marry someone like Camille Flammarion, who was working so hard constantly, it could only be a woman like Sylvie, who shared the same interest in astronomy as her husband. So she was a little bit like Amélie Boudet with Allan Kardec, co-working, collaborating to his works. She was also a committed feminist. She founded also a pacifist association called Peace and Disarmament by Women in 1899. You see, peace and disarmament is something we should maybe refresh nowadays, because we are still not finished with the wars, unfortunately. In the same period, Camille Flammarion went also to investigate Buguet's supposed mediumship about photography. You can see here the photography taken by Buguet of Camille Flammarion, and behind Camille you can see this so-called spirit who appeared behind him through the mediumship of Buguet. So Lemarie fell into the trap. He was publishing these pictures in the Spiritist magazine, who had a lot of selling because of that. And then it has been demonstrated that Buguet was lying. It was a fraud. And Camille Flammarion was imprisoned during 1 year because he cheated all the people who bought the Spiritist magazine because of false pictures which were published in it. But Camille Flammarion did not fall in this trap. And from the beginning, he was raising doubts about this possible fraud. Nevertheless, he did not raise the doubts before going. So he went there, he took a picture, he was looking, investigating how it was developed and so on, and came to the conclusion that it was suspicious. Okay. 1876, Flammarion observed the change of season in the dark region of Mars planet. We saw last week that he had his own observatory on the roof of the flat in the building where he was living in Paris. And the year after, he was publishing, 1877, Little Astronomy, Descriptive Astronomy, adapted for the needs of teaching by C. Delon. So it was a book which was for teaching astronomy in the schools or in the gymnasium. 1877, the lands of the sky, astronomical, physical, climatological, and geographical description of the planets which orbit with the Earth around the Sun, and the probable state of life on their surface. So he was studying each planet one by one and saying here, by the life like on Earth would not be possible because it's too hot, because it's too cold, because there is no atmosphere, and so on. So he made all these studies and published it in this book. He sent the book to Les Maris, to the Spiritist Society for continuation of Allan Kardec's work. And as you can see, it's maybe a little bit small here at the bottom. Camille Flammarion sent us this new book with a dedicace on it. And the dedicace was to the spirit of Allan Kardec, greetings of the author. Means that 1877, he still was admiring the work and that was done by Allan Kardec. Okay. 1878, he published a catalogue of double and multiple stars in certain relative motion. You know that we have a solar system is with one star, the sun in the middle. But some other solar system or equivalent system, instead of having one sun, they have two turning one around the other. For instance, it's I don't remember the name of this system yet. There were several ones, and that could be observed at that time with the instruments they had. And Camille Flammarion published then a catalogue of them. Yes, it came back. You know this famous constellation of Capella, from where, as per statements of Emmanuel through the mediumship of Chico Xavier, came a lot of spirits to Earth in the forming the Adamic race to help us, the humans, to go out of the caverns on Earth. That constellation of Capella, there is one of these double star existing there. Okay. Between 1876 and 1880, he continued making several flights in the balloon to study the atmospheric phenomenon, and in particular the atmospheric electricity, the lightnings, the thunder. And in 1879, he published an article about François Arago. François Arago was an astronomer who died before he went astronomer, when he was very young, and who was I was a first initiator of popular astronomy, and Camille Flammarion followed a lot the example of François Arago. So that's why he published this article homenageating François Arago in the newspaper called Le Voltaire. All these things, I found always the images and the articles. I mean, nowadays, really, in the French National Library, it's amazing all what we can find. But you have the title and the date, and you go there and you see in a couple of minutes, you can find the image of the article that you are mentioning, and the full extent of the text for all those who want to go deeper in the investigation. And 1880, this was really the huge success, a book called Popular Astronomy. Very, very nice, very thick, 839 pages. It was printed in 130,000 copies until as long as Camille Flammarion was alive. And it was even reprinted later on, century of the first print, and even in 2009, this book was reprinted, and it's really the one which made Camille Flammarion, I would say, known by almost everyone. And the book is absolutely wonderful. So it's popular, and also with a lot of images, and a lot of them in colors, as the one I have reproduced here, and also as the one which is used as a background here in the StreamYard windows that you are just looking. Very, very, very nice book. 1882, Camille and Ernest. Ernest was his brother. Here as well, you can see Ernest Flammarion. So his brother was publisher, and Camille and Ernest. Camille was writing the books, and Ernest, together with another one, which was called Marpon, they published the books. So really, of course, this success made that either both the publishing company and Camille Flammarion got, of course, a lot of money out of this selling of this publication. But we will see what Camille Flammarion made with the money. Everything was reinvested in observatories and new books and so on. Again, 1882, there was a complement to this nice book, which was this one, which was published in 1882. Curiosity of the Skies. 1882 to 1894, they published even a magazine, which was called L'Astronomie, sorry. Journal of Popular Astronomy, Meteorology, and Physics of the Globe. So they were publishing this paper during 12 years. And of course, all of them are also available at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, thanks God. 1882, he published, I think it's a small one, you see here in the bibliographic notice of the French National Library. So this I did not find an issue yet, so I will ask a copy to the National Library. It was only pages only, but the subject is quite interesting, human magnetism. So showing that Camille Flammarion was also interested in human magnetism at that time. And this is now 1882. The owner of the building of the former Juvisy post house, post office, Mr. Meret, he was horticulturist and enthusiast of astronomy and of Camille Flammarion. He donated the building to Camille Flammarion. And Camille then began the transformation of this old post office into an observatory. And here on the bottom, you can see on the left, the house when he got it. And on the right, you can see the house transformed. You see here, there is a tower in the middle with this spherical top where was the telescope. So he transformed this house into observatory, and this is still today. There are some difficulties. There have been some renewals done, of course, and to preserve this patrimony and the memory of Camille Flammarion. And this was in a city which was is in a city south to Paris called Juvisy-sur-Orge. It's about 30 kilometers south of Paris. So a little bit out of the city with the lights and so on, and in a place with less pollution, which was more favorable for the observations. So you see, between 1882 and 1884, Camille Flammarion invested to transform the building into this observatory, okay? Replacing part of the roof, adding a crenellated tower with a medieval appearance as a service access to the dome, okay? So this building still exists. I must admit I didn't go there, but I will go because there is also the archive of Camille Flammarion there to investigate. In particular, there must be some correspondences between Camille Flammarion and Allan Kardec, which is, of course, of very high interest to the spiritists. So it's part of my program this year to go and to visit that place and to try to visit also the Society for Camille Flammarion. There is still today a non-profit organization promoting the history of Camille. So here you can see him in this dome in Juvisy and with the instruments. It was an equatorial telescope, 240 millimeter in diameter, 3,750 millimeter focal length. So it was quite sophisticated for that time. It was not the top of the top, of course, but it was already powerful enough to make a lot of observations and studies. And here you have the program he was following. There were a lot of active collaborators with Camille Flammarion, and he worked on the physical study of the planets. You have seen the book published in the previous slide. The application of photography to the study of the sky. So it was the first application to make photography of the observation, because before it was the astronomer eye and then making some drawings. And he inaugurated the photography of what was seen by the telescope. And he, in Juvisy, made also meteorology, climatology, radioculture studies. And radioculture, what is it? He was studying the influence of solar rays on the shape, size, and color of the plants. So he had some greenhouses. The roof was in different colors, and he was studying the growth of the plants, looking which part of the sunlight was most favorable to the cultures, whether it's violet or the red or whatever. And he published also several studies together with Sylvie, his wife, on this radioculture. 1886, In Heaven and on Earth, Paintings and Harmonies, also a nice book he published. 1886, another very nice book, The World Before the Creation of Man. So you see about prehistorical eras and how the different evolution of species until reaching man. So he was also making this type of studies and investigations. 1887, he has drawn a general map of the moon, as you can see here. Of course, it's not possible to see, but when you zoom, it's quite a big paper. You can see all the craters and a very detailed map of the moon. 1888, the map of the moon, of course, is only the face of the moon we are seeing, because I think everybody knows that the moon, we see always the same face of the moon. The moon is turning around the Earth and turning around itself in the same period. So we see always the same face of the moon. And it's only since we have sent some, how to say it, satellites, or I don't know the exact name in English, which turned around the moon, who could make photography also of the dark side of the moon, of the other side of the moon. 1888, he published another book about atmosphere. It was a kind of a revision of the first one. So he was astronomer, but also popular meteorology, you see. Most of the book were not for scientists, but also for everyone. They were popular in a single language that could be understood by most of the people. Rêve étoilé, Starry Dreams, and this was a novel, romance, and it was openly spiritist, talking about the soul surviving, communicating with the beloved one who stayed on Earth, and so on. So, from 1890, he started to reopen a little bit. From 1870 to 1890, he was more dedicated to scientific things. In 1890, he opened it again to some spiritist books and also investigations. This one also, Urania, there will be teach about this book. It's very interesting. Again, openly spiritist novel. 1890, he wrote a book about the eruption of the Krakatoa, in Indonesia. It was a huge eruption with a huge explosion, a tsunami, which happened a couple of months before. It was really a major event on the Earth, considered as such still today. And Camille Flammarion wrote a book about this event. And here is what I was just commenting now. In the early 90s, Camille Flammarion frequented Charles Richet, the known also in his metapsychical investigation, and Xavier Dariex. They co-founded a magazine called Annales des Sciences Psychiques. This magazine was a kind of an equivalent of the proceedings of the Society of Psychical Research in UK. It was, I would say, the French version, really collecting facts and facts and facts. And Flammarion joined its editorial committee alongside other famous European spiritualists, which are William Crookes, Lombroso from Italy, Marcel Mangin, Maxwell Morselli from Italy as well, Osholowitz from Poland, and so on, Albert de Rocha, Schrenk-Notzing from Germany. And you can see here in 1893, you see the member of the council, Aksakov, Bernheim, Charcot, Crookes, Dariex, and you see here Camille Flammarion in Paris. So he participated, he started the investigation in psychical research, okay? He was active, and again, I told already last week that he was receiving a lot of testimonies and relations of fact from a lot of people, because he was very well known in France, very popular, known also as being interested in collecting such facts. So really, he got tens and tens and tens of such facts, and he was writing then articles in this magazine, like this one, which we see here, about apparitions, scientific constatation, always helping with a lot of facts. Okay. 1892, still continuing. Elementary astronomy, published by the Franco-American Education League. I mentioned already at the first speech that he was he was even the first president of the Education League in Paris, and he stayed in permanent contact from them. And this Education League was working in order for having popular education. So, of course, as Camille Flammarion wrote a lot of books popular, this collaboration with the Education League continued, and this book was published by this Education League, 1892. And interestingly, you can see here in the middle, on the cover page of it, there is a picture of Pestalozzi. You see, the world is very small, isn't it? Pestalozzi, who was the teacher of Hippolyte Léon de Dizar-Rivail. 1892, so this was already a book consequent following his own observation in the observatory of Juvisy about the planet Mars and its habitable conditions, general summary, climatology, meteorology, aerography, continents, seas and shores, water, snow, seasons, variations observed. Of course, they had very limited means to see. Nowadays, the observations have progressed a lot. At that time, they were thinking there were some seas on Mars, but today we came to the conclusion there is not. Nevertheless, it may be possible that there is some water, at least below ground or at the poles of Mars. What is Sky? One more book, 1892. 1894, Moonlight, very nice book as well. 1894 to 1898, he published Universal Encyclopedic Dictionary containing all the words of the French language and summarizing all human knowledge at the end of the 19th century. Imagine, 8 volumes of 1,000 pages each. This gives, an idea of the capacity of work he had to publish an encyclopedia. In general, it's a work of a team. He had probably the help of a lot of other collaborators. Nevertheless, it was a huge work. 1894, The End of the World, another book he published with a different scenario, historically, and meteorite or whatever could happen. 1894 to 1900, he was publishing the reports on this climatology station in Juvisy, 7 volumes as well. 1897, another romance, novel, which called Stella, also very interesting. 1898, Excursions in the Sky. I go a little bit quicker because, and so there are so many books that we get lost. So here is a slide, and I think I will finish with this one for today, showing in 1900 the list. The list of the main books he published. So you see, there were some philosophical books, as we have. I have cited most of them. Some practical astronomical books. You see, there was also astronomy teaching books. All those, popular astronomy. You see, in 1900, there was already 100,000 publications. Here you can see 16,000, 28,000, 10,000. The quantity of books he was published. General Science, The World Before the Creation of Man, 56,000. And also the literary variations, like the one we have cited. So this is just to summarize from 1842 to 900. So now I think we will need a fourth part to finish the last part of his life from 1900 to 1925, when he returned to the spiritual world. So thanks a lot again all for your time, for your patience. Should you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them now or even later on if you wish in the YouTube, through the YouTube channel. So it will be a pleasure for me to answer them in the best possible way. And I apologize for not having been able to finish in 3 parts. So I will see with Elsa and the people from the Group of Peace when we can make the end of this presentation, which will be probably a weekend in February. But the first weekend in February, the first Sunday of February, the 4th, you will have already the first speech about one of the last books that Flammarion published that I did not talk about it yet, which is Death and His Mystery. The first, no, this is volume 3, sorry, volume 2 and volume 1. So you see the books of Flammarion, you have very quickly a lot, each one 500 pages. That will be developed for you next Sunday, next week. So thanks a lot for your time and your patience.
Thank you, Charles. I'm really impressed by how prolific a scientist Camille Flammarion was. I can imagine you digging in information and finding more and more information. Didn't know he published in so many areas. And I knew he had important contribution in the advancement of astronomy and the popularization of astronomy, and often also in spiritism. But I'm really impressed, and we still have 25 years, the last 25 years of his life to go. So yes, as you said before, we hadn't planned before, but we see there's the need for a fourth presentation, a final one, where we'll get to know what he did in this final 25 years of his life. But I'm really impressed and really, really amazed. I want to say hello to Elsa Rossi, to Alexandre Caldini. He will be with us next Sunday.
Do the next speech. Right.
Yes, it will be his. I'll just make the announcements very soon. And also Faye Waddington. Faye has got a question for us. It is interesting to observe the number of scientists involved with the knowledge of Spiritism then and still today. Would say this is a trend for the future as well. What do you think, Charles?
For sure. There were some Crookes, Flammarion, Delanne, Barrett, Conan Doyle, a lot. But of course, I mean, those were convinced, but the majority was not convinced. But since it's a law of nature, sooner or later, nobody will be capable anymore to escape from the facts. One of the big difficulty, which was already perceived by Camille Flammarion, is that in this type of matter, a lot of times you cannot make experiments. And by the way, this is interesting because it's the same case in astronomy and in spiritualism. The astronomy, for instance, the explosion of a supernova, you cannot experiment. You have to wait, it happens, in order to observe it, and then try to analyze and to describe and so on. And the spiritualist phenomenon are a little bit the same. So what you can do is observe. It's very difficult to experiment. Of course, hypnotism, suggestion, magnetism, and even ectoplasmy. You have to wait to have a medium which is willing to submit to experiments, as William Crook has done. But you are never sure. You cannot do it like you do a chemical experiments an experiment of a chemical reaction. And this is one. So is it just because you cannot experiment like you want that it is not a science? No, astronomy is a science, and you cannot experiment. Observing the behavior of the wild animals, you also must interfere the less you can. You stay there, you look, and you observe. If you interfere, you are already introducing a bias. So the spiritualist phenomenon are a little bit the same. So it's not so easy to experiment as physics or chemical or whatever else. But and the other problem is someone is saying you, I saw this, for instance, EMI, EMI, NDE, near-death experience. EMI is in French, sorry. The people say, I saw this, I went through a tunnel. So either you believe in him or you don't believe. I mean, you depends what the people is saying. Then you have, of course, 100 saying the same thing without having interfered one on the other. The work of Raymond Moody is another story. And then the work done by Pim van Lommel, which was saying, I saw how psychologically the people were before the NDE and how they changed after. This is also a fact that you can investigate. But to check whether they have seen a being of light and whatever, who has said this and that to them, you cannot experiment. The only thing you can experiment is when they are saying, at the same moment, I went to that other place where I saw this and that happening. So things that you can verify, but it's very few part of the testimonies. But nevertheless, this is not a reason to reject it as not existing, because the scientists must adapt to nature, and not the nature will not adapt to the scientists. And this is exactly what we still need to understand. So these scientists need to stay a little bit more humble, to be a little bit more open-minded, to remove all these dogmas, because the materialist paradigm is a dogma. It has been clearly demonstrated in the book published recently by Alexander Moreira Almeida, Humberto Coelho, and the third lady, Science of Life After Death, that in terms of methodology, scientists need to stay humble and not to deny anything before looking carefully, investigating, and so on. And yes, as soon as it turn into become more in the practice, then of course it will be the disruption in science, really the change of paradigm. And I think it will be in the benefit not only of science but of the humanity as a whole.
We have one question here from Alexandre Caldini. Charles, how come there is much less, not to say none, experimental activities on spiritism today? Why are we only using mediumship communication for very unimportant, frivolous matters?
It's also a good question. A lot of people are saying we cannot do experiments anymore because there are no mediums, or the mediums are not willing to do the experiments. the Institut Métapsychique International, International Metapsychist Institution, is still existing. The Society for Psychical in Paris, the Society for Psychical Research is still existing in London. But of course, their activity is much reduced because this scarcity of mediums nowadays, or of mediums which are willing to submit to those extremely stringent conditions and protocols for experiments. Nevertheless, there are still meetings, but they are private, not open to these scientists. But my opinion is, as I just told, answering to the question of Faye, as soon as the science will be a little bit more open-minded, it will start again, and this is for sure. But I just would like to correct a little bit your statement, Alexander, when you say we are only using mediumship for unimportant frivolous matters. A lot of people are using for unimportant frivolous matters, like principally when involving money and all these sayings about the futures and whatsoever. But in the spiritist groups, mediumship is used for important tasks, which are not frivolous, which is to help the spirits in need, and also to help in some cases like obsession and whatsoever. So this is important and absolutely not frivolous. But it's more used for the finality. It's not the mediumistic meeting which are done for researchers. These, I agree, are today very few. But with good, open-minded scientists, it will start again for sure.
Thanks, Charles. So thank you, Alessandro Caldini. Thank you, Faye Waddington, Elsa Rossi, and all of those watching us. It's been very nice indeed. I'll just make some announcements before we go. So next week, our dear friend Alessandro Caldini will be with us. He will be talking about death and its mystery. The book is divided into 3 parts. The first one is Before Death, Proofs of the Existence of the Soul. So we have the pleasure of having with us here in the studio Alessandro Caldini. He'll be talking about this book by Camille Flammarion. Also, we have the Spiritist Center for Peace has on Wednesdays, 12 noon London time, open to those who want to take part, is an online study of the book Heaven and Hell, and also the Gospel According to Spiritism, both by Allan Kardec. Also on Saturdays, 10:30 a.m. London time, Guilherme Dias, Charles Kempf, and myself, we coordinate a study of the Medium's book, also open to everyone who wants to join the study. And we want to thank Kardec Radio for allowing us to use the studio. And so our heartfelt thanks to all of them. So as we said before, we are going to organize another meeting with Charles to finish the biography of Camille Flammarion. It's going to be very important to have this as a reference. I mentioned so many times, the book, the autobiography of Camille Flammarion is not available in any other language, as far as we know, other than French, the original language. And it's wonderful work that Charles has been doing, actually, to bringing all these information. And we see now how rich it is, and packed with a very valuable information about Flammarion, his contribution in so many areas. So it becomes sort of reference for those who want to know more about him. If you enjoyed this presentation, the previous one, just give us a like. It's very nice. And so we hope to see you all next Sunday, the same time, 7 p.m. UK time. It's going to be with Alessandro Caldini. And after that, we are going to organize another Sunday with Charles for us to finish the biography of Camille Flammarion. So for now, thank you very much indeed for being with us today and for watching it later. It's always a great pleasure for us to, bring something about Spiritism and those involved with it. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.